Well, here we are, back in paradise, and the Ryder Cup is nearby, so a lot of people are here visiting Sheboygan, and it just has a good feel to it, a good, positive, upbeat, emotional experience is going on. So, just thought I would touch base and make a video, talk about some ideas that may benefit you, and hopefully so, because, well, that's what you're here for. So if you're going to invest the time watching me, hopefully you'll get some benefit out of this. So what's new? Well, I just want to say, God is so good. I have seen so many confirmations of just how you can stop and correct things that are troubling you. And then God will bring about the truth in the situation to show you that most of the things that we beat ourselves up about are really just coming from a bad place within the impersonal mind of carnality itself. You see it, like I talked about in the last transmission, this impersonal mind comes against you and people around you. It's your enemy. It's Satan. It's the father of lies. It's the carnal mind expressed. It's human reasoning embodied in a collective thought field. So the example is, I was looking at a new ministry property, throughout the summer. I looked at it a couple times. And the second time I looked at it, the first time I looked at it, something just wasn't right, and I thought, we'll see, maybe I'll pray about it and I'll let it go for now. And see, this is the thing, patience is the weapon that forces deception to reveal itself. I learned that from Dr. Mike Murdoch. And so, I just use patience whenever I make, decisions like this. So, I figure if it's meant to be, it'll chase me. That's really how the game works. And so what I did is I just relaxed and allowed and stepped back. And then I revisited the idea. And the guy who is selling it for himself, he's his own listing agent, etc., whatever, he had this really weird personality, and he just came unglued the second time I looked at it, because I ultimately turned it down the second time. And he said just the nastiest things you could ever say. And he was so verbally on the offense, it was almost as if the guy's a psychopath, to make a long story short. Hello. But I had to pray about this, because I thought, is there something that I did wrong? Was I, did I do something to offend this guy? And I prayed about it and I let it go. And then I was at hockey practice. This is about 3 weeks later. I'm at hockey practice with my daughter Fiona. And this is how good God is. God will bring you the clarity that you need to let go of whatever's troubling you. Because this had troubled me. This guy really came unglued. And to all appearances, it's a successful guy who's very wealthy, has a lot of properties and, hotel and land and all this. And I thought, gosh, how did I offend this guy so much? Well, anyway, I'm talking to a woman, and the first synchronicity is she tells me her brother, played semi-pro hockey, and that the family is all hockey players. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. What's his name? And so she tells me his name, and I said, I was on his team. And she goes, shut up. And I'm like, yeah, I was on his team. Now, this is not the city that we grew up in, but it's a small world. I was on his team. So I played with this guy, and she puts him on the phone, and I just talked to him, reconnected with him. And I started to get this sense of, okay, what's God doing in my life? And God's bringing me into this hockey community now with my daughter, through my daughter. And it's bringing me back ultimately to my childhood, because that's where, I grew up in that, just like my daughter, with my grandparents taking me to hockey and, giving me that rich experience of, youthful, all the joy along with it. It's just an amazing community. Like, hockey's like a religion. It's got its own thing. Once you're involved, you don't know what it's like till you're involved. It's a whole nother world altogether. And so that was one thing. And then I go over and I'm talking to another set of parents, and Sabrina is with her mom. She came to watch Fiona too, and she introduces me to this woman, and her son is the coach for Fiona, and he's a really good hockey player, played for many years, and she's, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, Sheboygan. I said, how about you? And she's like, oh, I live on this road, and she mentions the street name. I said, I've been there before. She says, you have? Because this is a real tucked away area. This is a real secluded area on a nature preserve. That's where the house was. And I said, yeah, I went to go look at this house. And she goes, you looked at that house? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And she goes, he's been trying to sell that for 6 years. And I'm like, wow. And then she tells me how the incident, about how he's pretty much alienated everyone, okay, like to the point where, this is an older woman, and she said her granddaughter was out on the street and he almost hit her with his truck. He was driving drunk, and the cops had to come, and he was hiding in his own attic. Long story short, he was very abusive to his wife, and her father demanded that she divorce him and take the kids and leave. And so here, to all appearances, this guy puts himself together as if he's like real proper, I'm a business professional, and he carries this demeanor about him. But then he goes bipolar or some sort of freak out mode, and he tries to hoist his evil. It's not even his evil. See, that's the thing. So here's what I did. I want to backtrack a bit. So I got the clarity I needed, and it gave me confirmation that what I tuned into was the right message that I said to this guy. So I gave it 24 hours before I responded to this guy after he went off the cuff on me. He just came out swinging. I mean, this guy came out swinging because I rejected to buy his property, okay? And he said just all these insane comments, literally insane. So the next day I said, God, what do you want me to do? And I, almost word for word, what I said to him was, I said, I pray that you'll find healing in your broken places, because obviously you need it. And I said, and I also pray that you'll recognize the impact of your harsh words, because it may have already destroyed the lives of others around you. And I didn't know all this stuff at the time, but God that was like a channeled writing. And I sent that to him, and he never responded back. But, I get confirmation just the other day that this is absolutely what's going on. God revealed to me what was happening. Now, what was in that little message? I prayed that he would receive love in the broken places. You see, because it's not him, the man that God created, that's the problem. It's the impersonal evil that's attaching itself because of something that he is holding that is in defiance to the will of good. Now, what is it that he's holding? Because maybe it pertains to both of us, you and I listening to this, because I'm listening to this, I replay it for myself, and then I learn from my own transmissions, because most of it comes channeled. Once I get into the flow, it just starts coming. So what is it that we learn from this episode is that when Jesus said, you are to love thy neighbor as thyself, you see, this is the only way to access the kingdom consciousness. And we often don't do that. And that's why I had to pray for 24 hours before I responded to him, because my first instinct was to say, well, hey, you want to like meet me outside? You want to go at it or what? Like, I mean, this guy was coming unglued for no reason whatsoever. It was completely a psycho meltdown. And I didn't do that. I didn't respond that way because I knew that, first of all, it was allowing the law of strife to persist. See, the law of envy and strife is what governs the carnal mind, and it's an impersonal mind. And so what we do is we allow that impersonal thought, suggestion, that there is separation between good and good's manifest, God and God's man, and we allow ourselves to rest in the friction of that dielectric tension between polarized opposites. You see what I'm saying? What I'm saying is, essentially we come into lack or want to some capacity, safety, approval, or control we're seeking, and because of that, we engage with the carnal mind by allowing it to remote control us, like the people in the Matrix that get hijacked by the agents. It remote controls us. You see, it's a signal. Just like the consciousness of God, of good, is the signal that we call the Christ, the truth that comes to man. Okay? When we allow that consciousness to embody all of our attitudes and behaviors, then we are in a covenant covering protection of good. And so how do we maintain the integrity of that covenant? Is that we allow the weapon of patience to force deception, to force the carnal mind out, to reveal itself as nothing more than an impersonal shadow of fallen consciousness. You see, the law of strife itself. And so patience is the weapon, and it is a weapon that you can use, you see, in all of your relationships. You can use the weapon of patience to separate the man that God created from the fictional carnal mind that is remote controlling the host. And that is how you can set the man free. You can cast the demons out of the man. You can do that because you know the truth. And there's only one mind, and the mind that contemplates truth demonstrates truth in its own construct. That's how powerful you are. You do not have a lesser mind than God. Now, Jesus the man came to teach that theology. That I of myself can do nothing, he said, but it is the Father in me that doeth the works. Telling you that that consciousness, that the Father is signaling as his manifest reflection, is your life, your substance, your intelligence, your all-sufficiency in all things. And what separates you from it, go back to the first principle, to love God and to love thy neighbor. Boom, end of discussion. You see, what does that mean? Well, to love God is to love good. To love the qualities of the fruits of the Spirit. And to focus on those qualities as the only thing that you permit to remote control you. You see? But you break the law. You transgress against the law if you don't love thy neighbor, because what you are doing is you are coming against what God created, that God called good, because you are deceived in your five senses, believing that the remote controlling carnal mind is the host, when there is no substance or law back of it. See, it is the lawless one. I repeat, the carnal mind that people fall asleep into, okay? They fall asleep in a dream and they become mesmerized by it, and then it's like they're remote controlled via this mind. At the end of the day, there's nothing there, because it's the lawless one. It has no law back of it, which means it has no root, which means it has no home. It has no resting place. So what does it do? It scours the earth in a cloud or a vapor of ignorance. And that's why in the Nag Hammadi library, when Christ said, "He who has found the world has discovered a great corpse, and he who has come to himself, the world is not worthy of him." That is what Jesus Nazarene Christ said in the Nag Hammadi library. Now, I know some people out here, and it bless their heart, but they want me to, get on my knees and say that, Jesus the man is the only way to heaven and all this stuff, right? And I'm not going to say that's not true. I'm going to say that is true. But ultimately, if you don't separate the fiction from the fact, then you don't have any root behind any of your theology. So what is the fiction and what is the root? So the fiction is the 5 sense carnality that you observe. The bag of bones, meat sack being that you see before your lying human eyes. Now it also says in the Nag Hammadi library that Christ represented and revealed himself to mortals as a mortal. So the human mortals were able to see the principal embodiment, the composite idea of God. See, man is a composite idea of God's qualities. So the Christ principle clothed itself in many forms in order that those who had fallen asleep could have that revealed to them, because they couldn't see the truth. So that's how that is true, yes. But you want to take it a step further, because here's the problem, is that the symbology that runs the planet, that is a counterfeit of the real, presents itself to you as the authentic one, and the mortal mind, because it has a corrupted language system, adverb, verb, adverb, adjective, pronoun computing system that was all entangled in fiction, your mind grasps onto the lie. The mortal mind, the carnal mind that people identify with because they're being remote controlled by it, because they're always at war with their neighbor, because they broke the first 2 commandments, because they have more gods than one, okay? They believe in wooden dolls, they believe in statues, they believe in statism, they believe in capitalism, they believe in all of these gods, because they're always looking outside of themselves for approval, safety, and control. And that is their worship. That is what they worship. It doesn't matter what their lip service says, it's what their heart is doing. So they go into the church, they go into the Catholic Church, which is Catholic means covering, okay? The original etymology root means it's covering. Covers the earth. Okay? So if you understand what you're dealing with, the rulers in the Gnostic Gospels say the rulers, they took that which was the truth and they substituted it with fiction, and they deceived all. That's what happened in the world consciousness. So when you go into the church, what you see is you see a play. You see a fictional dramatization of something that's going on in the real as a counterfeit substitute as the unreal, and the mortal mind, which is governing the lawless one, you see, the lawless one that's remote controlling its hosts that are breaking the first 2 commandments. They grasp onto it because their father of lies corrupts and corrupts and corrupts and corrupts, and there's no end to the corruption until it destroys itself. And so those who are governed by that lawless one, which the majority are, they need you to come along as the principle of truth and cite only that which is pleasing in the sight of God, which is to know the truth, and then you can set them free from their carnality. That is what my attempt and my aim was with this man, because this is a man that God hath created. How do I know? because it breathes, and there's only one breath, and it thinks, and there's only one mind. You see, there's only one imagination and one breath, a spoken word. The spoken word and the imagination are the only two things that are of the deity that you possess. Everything else is a representation of the carnal mortal mind. So I don't look at the carnal mortal mind and all of the evil that is coming out of that thing that attempts to attack me. Although it was tempting, because if I don't subdue that mind, then I become one with it. I fall into the same dream. And it's two sides of the same coin. He's right, and then I'm right, but we're both wrong, you see? And two wrongs don't make one right. So what I did instead, and this is how you operate in this thing, in this confusion, matrix of confusion, is you separate the fiction from the fact. And you behold the creation, as I talked about in 2 videos ago, through the eyes of love. The parent of all creation is love. So you become the parent of all creation by beholding the creation with the eyes of love. That is what Jesus Nazarene Christ taught his disciples. Again, that is why you are commanded to be an equal to Christ. Because love is the principle, and when you come under the governance of the principle, you become the demonstrated manifest as an equal to Christ. And so the Christ that comes through you bears no unholy motive, and therefore it destroys the fiction. The principle of truth always destroys the outer fiction. It feeds the deficiency, and it gives it the bread of life. And that's all dramatized in the Catholic Church and their whole Mass and all these things that they do. It's all a play. And I talked about that in our workshop that we're into, and I gave a whole breakdown of how it works. Not that you need to know, but if you wanted to know, you can go deeper in these teachings if you ever want to. But what you have to do is you have to show up being controlled only, governed only by the law of love. Real simple. And then when you turn to that principle of love, knowing that it fills all space and it never left anything out of its substance and that there is no evil in its substance, and you see the man as God created, as perfect and pure, and not a single element of error could possibly exist in that man, because that would break the principle of love at its core. You see, Logic 101, it's so simple. But when you hold on to that, then wisdom will come to you, and your actions will be governed by wisdom, and as you respond from that wisdom, you set free the captive. You see, the words that I sent him, he didn't have a response for, because those words were designed to be a double-edged sword and destroy the very carnal stronghold that was holding him captive and asleep in a dream. So this is the scientific principle of how you heal any condition as well. Now, one of the secrets that I taught in the workshop, and I'll tell you right now because you need to know, is that material substance, what you call matter, that your 5 senses reports to you. Example, I'm walking on this concrete, or so I think I am, and there are other people, and there's water, and there's a boat, and there's all this stuff around me in this holographic universe that my 5 senses report to me as dense physical matter. They're actually frozen thought fields in time and space. And so they've slowed down, into a frozen, collected position. And so the law that binds matter in the carnal mind is the law that holds these frozen objects in time and space. So we have to undo that law by reversing it in the exact opposite direction. We have to turn it back into gas and back into nothingness. And so what happens is, as soon as we become conscious that we're looking at nothing but thought, and that thought is all, we turn it back from material stuff into thought, and then we reject and replace, and we reinstitute ourselves in a new way, and we vaporize it back into nothingness again. Okay, that's how instant healings are done. That's how financial problems are solved that you don't have answers to, is you have to first understand the difference between being in the dream of carnality, of fiction, of mortality with the five senses, and the separate kingdom that is forever intact. See, there's a principle that is forever in operation, like mathematics of 2 + 2 = 4. It's always in a principle of perfection, okay? Now, that principle of perfection gets distorted in the natural, because if I tell you that 2 + 2 = 4, and you agree with me, I just told you a lie and you just fell into a pit. Because what I said is TOO plus TWO equals FOR. You're agreeing with me that TOO plus TWO equals FOR? Oh, you said, no, I thought you meant this. And see, that's the communication breakdown that they call Babel in the natural. See, the communication breakdown is how the fall of man perpetuates itself through ignorance. Because you didn't hear me. You heard something completely different. The signals were crossed, you see? And so that goes on all day, every day amongst mortals, and they fall into their own pits because of deception at every turn. That's called the deficiency of the outer. See, you didn't have all the information. Therefore, you were tricked and you were trapped into deception. You see, you agreed to a lie and you fall into ignorance because you knew not of the original sponsoring thought. You see? The sponsoring thought of God is always the truth of the permanent position of authority that never falls from its own perfect place of rest. Its works were complete. It's Genesis 1. That is the fact, and that is where you exist in the factual position that is immovable, eternal, immutable, perfect, harmonious, joy-filled. See, love made manifest. And so how you get back to that perfection is you come to the world as the parent through the eyes of love, and you perceive what God perceives. See, then you come back to the first principle root idea, and then when I say 2 + 2 = 4, you have the knowledge of the Father that brings the wisdom to discern between the lines what the truth is. You see, what I just told you will hit you in the morning, because that's what happened with this guy. See, the guy was on the verbal offensive attack. But you see, what I did differently was I beheld the creation through the eyes of love, and I waited upon the Lord to reveal between the lines what the truth was about this manifest creation of God, and bring about the cleansing of the error that was holding this man captive to his transgressions against his brother. You see? And so I was able to just put it out there in one quick paragraph, because God reveals it to you, but you can't get that revelation until you are knowing what God knows to be true. And so you have to easily and effortlessly and automatically just root yourself back to first principle. God is all, God is love. Hence, PTT in it, okay? If you don't know what PTT is, just go back and go to my website, MatthewDavidHurtado.com. Take the courses I have. You will be light years ahead of where you began, okay? And the more you listen, the better, because you can never unknow once you know. And so as your mind stretches and as you let go of the old self, you will be on terra firma, and you will be supported in a new level of consciousness that won't fall out on you, okay? Because when I say 2 + 2 = 4, you will have the insight to know the frame of reference that I'm coming from, because wisdom will reveal all secrets to you. Wisdom is the Father, the tongue of the Father. It is the mind of God reaching its man. It is the omniscient part of the Trinity, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. It is the mind. And see, when you are one with the mind of God, then all is revealed. And when all is revealed, then you don't have to live in deception and trickery anymore. And that's where you ultimately want to be. All right, so that's the end of my transmission. Flow state is coming to a close here. But as you can see, it takes me a few minutes, usually 5 to 7 minutes, when I start these transmissions and I get into flow state. And it's the same phenomenon that all artists and athletes and, trained warriors have always used, is they have to be able to slip out of the paralysis of analysis into the all-knowing, improvising state of full and complete surrender. Okay? And that full and complete surrender through vulnerability is your strength. And so that transmission was another notch in the teachings. Again, at my website, the courses I would recommend are right there, first and foremost. The first course is the 3-2-1 Prosperity Formula. That's where it all began. That was the capstone of all the teachings, okay? It's tithing, non-judgment, following the fastest path to joy in every moment, rinse and repeat. It's super simple. And no, it's not the Catholic tithe. Everything is the twinning, polarized dielectric. There's always a truth and a counterfeit. So when you understand where the heart comes from as the truth, and the counterfeit is the material part, then you'll recognize that is the condition of state of the heart that is the determining factor of whether you shall activate the law of love or not. God is not deceived by arrogance. Mortals with their vanity are blasphemy in the sight of God. God is only impressed by the heart of man, the love that man has for God and for his neighbor. That's all the commandments were supposed to be. See, the Mosaic law came because corruption is so deep. Okay, the left side of the Bible versus the right side of the Bible, it's the structure is the message. Everything is structure. The structure in the Old Testament means reasoning man, mortality, carnal-mindedness, and the outpicturing of a deity that has wrath, judgment, envy, and all these things, right? Then we come into Malachi, we come into the midbrain, we come into the Christ consciousness, and we open up the totality of all that is through surrender. And we come into the New Testament, we come into the new gospel of good, which is the one God, the God of good, the firmament, the position of perfection that never breaks the continuity. And we want to be in the New Testament, and so we don't have to adhere to the Pharisees that are forever in existence. You see, the Pharisees that run the central banking cartels, it's the same story repackaged for all of eternity. People say, well, who runs the world? Who do you think runs the world? The same rulers that have always been documented throughout all recorded history. They didn't leave. The sorcery didn't stop. You're in a matrix. A matrix is a AI quantum computing system algorithm that you were sent into because you have fallen and turned away from the principle of good as a defected mortal, okay, that are cursed from the beginning, but yet Christ comes into you, the consciousness of truth comes into you, and you resurrect out. That's what the ether is. That's what the fifth element is. And the cross is the four elements, and the ether is the risen Christ. And the G, okay, and the G in the Masonic symbol is Genesis, and then there's one G, which means Genesis 1. And all the symbols are there to teach you how to get out of this matrix. But they're also there to portray the artificial construct so that the mortal mind can never escape. It is bound. So you must become immortal to escape. Now that's a conundrum, and we're getting there. If you listen closely to what I'm teaching you, you will see the falling away of the fear or compulsions. They will fall away like arrows in the midst of flight because in your new consciousness, you will no longer give them the wings to fly. And you will succeed as others have succeeded before you. No, I didn't make this up. I didn't invent this in a, pot-smoking stupor or an acid drop somewhere. I had studied a lot of the ancient texts in a quiet space with a flow state mind, and I'm able to enter that state as you are, and I have given myself to that position. All you are required to do is give yourself to that position and let the teacher, which is the Holy Spirit, come into you and guide you step by step, and you will escape Babylon. Babylon is a prison. You are in a prison planet, which is a matrix. Hold on one second. We got bees everywhere. Bees are everywhere. So I had to make friends with that bee real quick before he was hostile with me. So you are in a matrix and you must escape. And there's only one way out. There's only one way out. Now, why should you listen to me? Well, you shouldn't listen to me because you like the arguments that I'm presenting. But you should put the arguments that I'm presenting to the test to see if there's any merit to it. And you should be able to discern promptly, because the truth comes like a double-edged sword and it doesn't take any prisoners. And so when you step into it, you should start to see the dismantling of the strongholds that have been binding you down to carnality. And then you shall know. You shall know them by their fruits. Okay, I'm checking out, so enjoy the rest of your day.